We all know that Somerset is rich in history, filled with beautiful landscapes and holds many myths and legends. One particular story, and probably the county's most famous folktale, is that of the Gurt Worm. Only in the West Country could we have a mythical beast called a Gurt Worm. A tale that has been interpreted in many ways over the last century and has left a lot of speculation of the authenticity of the tale and where it came from. So, grab a tea or coffee, or even better, a cider, and let me tell you more.
So here we are at the Quantocks, an area of outstanding natural beauty, ancient history and dark folk tales. We're about to enter Shervage Wood, where the Gurt Worm is said to lurk. So let's go for a walk. So the typical story of the Gurt Worm is that it was lurking in these woods, terrorising the local community, eating their livestock like sheep and ponies, making the local villagers absolutely terrified to enter this woodland. This was especially bad for a local baker who would come to these woods to forage whortleberries for popular tarts, and with her not being able to pick any, worried about the Gurt Worm, it was putting her business in detriment. One day, a woodsman from the village of Crowcombe passed by the village of Crowcombe looking for work. The baker, not warning him of the Gurt Worm, hired him to go cut wood in Shervage Wood, and while there, check to see if the whortleberries are ripe. The woodsman, none the wiser, accepted the job. So, the baker gave him cheese sandwiches and cider, and off he went into the woods, with the locals staring at him as he slowly disappeared into the woodland, wishing him luck, as they knew he would have needed it. Part of the way through the day, he decided it was time for a break. So he found a log to sit on and tucked into his sandwiches and washed it down with the delicious local cider. Then, to his shock, the log starts to wiggle about and move. He jumps up in panic, and in the heat of the moment, grabs his axe and strikes down onto the log, and the log splits into two. Then, to his horror, the log begins to bleed. It was then he realised that it wasn't a log. The whole time, it was in fact the Gurt Worm itself. The woodsman fled, and no one knows what happened to the remains of the Gurt Worm, but it was never seen again. So finally, locals could walk around these woods in peace, and livestock were no longer harmed.
It really doesn't seem clear when the story was originated and what it was actually based on. The story of the Gurt Worm first got widely known through what is now the legendary book published back in 1965, Somerset Folklore, by the Quantocks-based folklorist Ruth Tongue. There has been a lot of criticism towards Ruth Tongue, with many saying she was known to just completely make up stories or reinterpret them in a way that was just far from the original. Now, it's very hard to find a copy of the book, as it's obviously very old, and even when you do come across a copy online, it's very expensive. I was able to find a digital version of the book and read Ruth's version of the story.
Now that story is written in a Somerset dialect, and I didn't think telling the story with my very posh and sophisticated accent would do it justice. But I found a local farmer with a more appropriate accent who can tell the story. Don't worry, I'll leave subtitles. There was a tremendous Gurt Worm over at Shervage Wood, with a lying in and out the trees round about the camp, so big and fat, round and 2 3 girt oaks. When they felt hungry, they just swallowed down about 6 sheep and 7 ponies, or sheep, and went back to sleep comfortable. Well then, by farmers do notice sheep in up along, and they're wanting more than couple skinny ponies in Bridgewater Fair next year. The worm, he was getting a bit short of his meals like. The deer and the rabbits, they was all over the hurdy pecan on the other side of the hills, and there wasn't a sheep left. And the ponies, I reckon, he had run down over the valley to 40 acre. Now there was a poor old soul who made the soul tarts, the warlocks for Triscombe Revel. Where made they torch brutes and fill them up with thick dap or cream that made he come back from all so fast as a dog will eat wit pop. Well, look, see, there wouldn't likely be no tart for her left to sell on account no one was going up there to see how the worts were ripening. And her didn't sell no tarts, then the Crimson Revel her get no money for the rent. Poor old soul. Her was in a shramble. Well then, here come a stranger to Crowcombe, all the way from Stokenburg, I expect, and he were a woodman looking for work. So up and tell her, why don't you try cutting in Shervage wood up over to look and see for what's getting ripe. Poor soul, he were desperate, see. So we're given a cider, a firkin, bread and cheese and washes up and go off into the coombe. Being a Stewburger stranger, he wasn't used to Quantock hills, and by the time he walked into the Shervage wood, he see the wonderful fine lot of works and he would feeling there quite time for his cider, like this. So he looks around and he see the bit of Gurt log on the firm. He just sat nice, he started to numb it when the log begins to scream about and eating. Oh, the bait, says he, picking up his axe. Do movie, do we? Take that then. And the axe came down so hard the log cut into two. And both ends of the log began to bleed. This one, in the end, ran up as hard as he could to Debunked, and the other up ended up Kingston St. Mary. And since then, they two cars went the wrong way they met. The Gurt Worm couldn't now always go together again. Sure, her died. Well then, the woman just sat and finished the nummet and cut his faggot, took the poor old soul and grew a handful of warts. There were a dragon there first go off, he tells, her very thoughtful. Her says is, didn't you know, didn't someone tell ye, her were a Crowcombe woman?
Now, what you'll see here is actually clearly notes. I have written this from early recollections of a jovial, never storyteller of the tale in my childhood, and the recitals of local epics and libels by a thatcher of my acquaintance. So she is stating that this is not her version of the story per se, but a version of the tale she heard second hand. So what is the earliest recorded story of the Gurt Worm? Well, after going through many articles online and asking around, the earliest I have come across is a feature in a journal simply called Folklore, published by the Folklore Society, of which began in 1890 by a man going by the name of Rex Whistler. This story from 1907, which predates Ruth's tongue story by about almost half a century, his version of the story goes. Still, on the western slope of the hills, it is said that a dragon with two heads was slain by an unnamed champion of Crowcombe, and one of the bench ends in the church records to defeat another dragon, also carved in the church, was killed by a champion of the Fitzwarren family near Taunton at Norton Fitzwarren, but of these two exploits no details are preserved. A third dragon, which had its habitation in Shervage Wood below Danesborough Camp on the eastern slope of the hills, is however told of very definitely and is still used as a deterrent to children who might linger too late among the whortleberry bushes. It was a long dragon, one of that sort they called a worm, and devoured every living thing within reach. Consequently, the local woodman was unable to go to the wood and cut the faggots of which his living depended. At last, however, starvation drove him to work at a time when the dragon seemed to have gone elsewhere in search of prey, and during the morning he cut wood unmolested, seeing or hearing nothing of the terror. At noon he sat on a fallen log half buried in fern to eat his nummet, and as he sat the log heaved under him. It was the sleeping dragon, whereon in desperation he leapt up and crying, "So thee do movie, do ye? Take that then!" He struck his axe into the beast and fled. But what became of the dragon no man knows, for it was never seen afterward.
So this is a little different from the Ruth's tongue version. And you notice he mentioned a certain bench end in a church in Crowcombe. So tell you what, let's head to Crowcombe and investigate.
the rural village of Crowcombe, we have the beautiful Church of the Holy Ghost, a church that is Saxon in origin, with the earliest part of the church being 14th century. This church is known for its absolutely stunning bench ends, featuring several green men, mermen, beautiful fieldfort-like patterns, and this, the very bench end that is said to be depicting the Gurt Worm. Now, as you can see, there are two naked men fighting this dragon, and this dragon has one face on its stomach. Now, this is where it's going to get confusing. Rex Worcester's version doesn't say that this is specifically the Gurt Worm. In fact, he doesn't mention the name Gurt Worm at all. He refers to the Shervage wood dragon as the fur dragon. Now, in Ruth Tongue's book, she also mentions the Quantock dragon and the Dragon of Kingston before talking about the Gurt Worm. Tongue says the Gurt Worm was slain by a man from Stowcumber, whereas Worcester says it was by a champion of Norton Fitzwarren. Could this be an example of when various versions of the folktale get passed down throughout the centuries and merge into one established version of it? But let's compare the bench end to the story. Both stories I've mentioned say that the dragon was slain by one person, and it was cut in two using an axe. Here, there are two people, and they are using spears. What does match the stories, however, are these whortleberries. But now we have the question. Did the legend of the Gurt Worm come first, and this bench end was made depicting it, or was the bench end here first, and the story was made up that was inspired by this bench end?
These bench ends date back to 1534, with the earliest story of the Gurt Worm that I could dig up was from 1907, so these bench ends do predate the story of the Gurt Worm by a good few hundred years. There's also another piece of evidence that, sadly, might ruin the story of the Gurt Worm for you.
Let's now head to the not so far away city of Bristol. Inside Bristol Cathedral, we have these miscreants. These miscreants date back to 1515 to 1526, which make them older than the Crowcombe bench ends. And under one of the miscreants, look at what we have. Like the design in Crowcombe, we have a dragon with a face on its stomach, chasing three men this time, of whom are all naked. Now, there are more around England in this style of a two-headed dragon chasing naked men, and also this image appears in the French Book of Hours, which is a type of prayer book from around 1500. The Bristol miscreant was clearly based on this. So thus it's very likely that the bench ends were commissioned by the same workshop, making it very clear that the bench ends in Crowcombe Church came first and the story of the Gurt Worm came later.
Some may refer to the story of the Gurt Worm as fake folklore. Now, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, isn't all folklore fake in that respect? I mean, there was never really a dragon in Shervage wood, it's just all completely made up. Well, let my good friend the Jolly Reaver explain.
What do we mean by the term fake folklore, and how is it different from real folklore? First, let's actually define folklore. Folklore is a tradition that emerges from a community. This could be songs, stories, rituals, sayings. It can appear in a whole host of forms, from tales of a goblin that lived near a local well, to a dance that's practiced every spring outside the village hall. These traditions are passed along face to face until they feel ownerless. However, when a tale or tradition is deliberately manufactured, usually for profit, publicity or entertainment, and then presented as a genuine old belief or tradition, this is when we can start to call it fake folklore. Let's look at some examples. First, how does genuine folklore come about? Imagine an English village, and one night a couple of lads are returning from the pub, and they see, or think they see, a spectral black dog behind them on the path. They make a run for it, and the next day they tell all their friends and family. Then, a week later, there's another sighting by a postman making his rounds. Now with two sightings, the story is circling around the area more, and it's all the locals can talk about. Some of the stories are conflicting as accounts are heard from friends and then friends of friends. Some people decide to make up a song about the black dog, and it eventually becomes a local folk song. The children in the school are also tasked by the teacher to write a poem about the black dog. Before long, a writer or folklorist hears these stories and records it. Regardless of whether the black dog was real or not, the village naturally produced a real piece of folklore and culture formed around it. It spread word of mouth before making its way onto paper, and then, no doubt years later, into media. But now let's look at how fake folklore can come about with an example. A man decides to Photoshop a terrifying creature into an old historical photo and posts it on various forums online, complete with a backstory. A few content creators then run with this popular new spooky tale, and the videos get hundreds of thousands of hits. To add legitimacy, one of the content creators adds to the lore, sharing a genuine photo from 1934, labelled as a local patrol on the hunt for this creature after it attacked a local woman. Then, a well-respected publication runs a story on this online trend, seeing that it's getting popular, with a headline declaring it might not be all as far-fetched as it seems, and quoting an obscure but genuine 1950s news article about a woman that was attacked by an unnamed assailant in the area. And behold, a fake picture posted on a message board now has a whole universe of lore around it. It's not fiction to the masses, but a real piece of spooky history that they're convinced has been in the culture for decades. And things like this do happen all the time. The story of Slender Man, a creature known to everyone that's used the internet, was born from a photoshopped picture. The story of England's supposedly most haunted woodland that features in countless viral YouTube videos comes complete with a 1948 newspaper clipping of the 20 students that went missing and were found dead. Except it's not a real clipping. There were no missing students, and the picture shows a Soviet officer in Lithuania inspecting victims of a massacre, and there's a literal Facebook link in it. A newspaper, The Scotsman, tells us all about how the ancient Celts had a strong belief in the Wulva, a creature from Shetland folklore. Except it's not, because it was invented in 1932 by author Jesse Saxby. In the age of the internet and AI, it's now easier than ever to present fiction as an age-old belief. We're bombarded with it, for clicks and views that return entertainment and profit. So, next time you see a video appear on your feed about an age-old tale that you're only just hearing about now, ask not who told it last, but rather, who told it first?
Regardless of what your take is of the Gurt Worm, it is still a wonderful folk tale. Ruth Tongue only had good intentions when she publicised the story in a now infamous book of Somerset folklore. It's a story that the young and the more grown-up generation that are just getting into folklore take pride in because it's so unique to Somerset. The myth of the Gurt Worm has been echoing around the Quantocks for over a century now. Its impact has certainly enriched Crowcombe and the surrounding areas. Thank you for watching, and remember, I'm not a historian or an academic, this is simply my love and my passion. I'd like to hear what you think about this. What's your take on the Gurt Worm? What's your take on the whole concept of fake folklore? What do you think of Ruth Tongue? I'd really like to hear more views. In the meantime, check this video out. This is a video I did with the Jolly Reaver himself when we investigate a certain Somerset folktale. So, thank you all for watching. Please subscribe. Thank you.